I think we can all deal with a difficult today if we have a compelling tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And tomorrow can be brought closer, like immediately by taking some actions. It's pretty damn exciting. So I'm overjoyed that we can share with people these tools that, like, as David said, they're there, but it takes, I read a study that was done by the Washington Medical Association that said it takes 17 years from the time a breakthrough happens till it actually shows up in clinical practice. But there are doctors that are on the cutting edge that know this stuff right now. And if you know who they are, you can start to make changes most people think are impossible.
I've done a couple housekeeping. Well, actually, I didn't do any housekeeping, so you can do the housekeeping if you'd like. But just letting everybody know, a reminder that our links are in bio for them to sign up. Oh, and there's Brian. Love you so much. The links are in both of our bios for them to sign up for the replay for this interview today, and then of course, all the other ones as well. And all the notes and everything else that come through from our longevity lifestyle series, and that we are going to follow up with more interviews and more episodes. We just haven't had a chance to yet. Both of us have been traveling quite a bit, and that today will be very conversational. We'll chat a lot about Tony's book, but just about what we're all doing in the longevity and health space. So kind of us like nerd out a bit. So a lot of people are saying hello to you. There's Ian. People have been really loving and amazing. So.
Hey, yeah, I want to say something, which is this community that you built and we built and brought together here. It really is amazing. To use your word, I've just been floored by the enthusiasm and the warm welcome. We're going to have a great chat today with Tony. It's really kind of him to join us, and the two of us are really looking forward to him joining and asking him some tough questions, I think.
And in a couple of minutes, Tony will be on, and I don't know. I let everyone know that questions have come in. We might not get a chance to ask all the questions, to answer all the questions. And questions can come through here via the comments, and we'll try, but we'll just see what goes in flow and what comes through. But I just want to acknowledge you, David, because you are in the book. You're in chapter 4. So for those of you who don't have the book yet, it's right here behind Gizmo. Gizmo's sort of sleepy, so I'm not going to move him, but I'll lift up the book. A lot of David's work, and Tony was able to sort of sum up a lot of what David does in chapter 4 of Life Force, and he's peppered throughout along with a lot of other experts. So, I know that there's such a large community here that loves your work, David, and so I just want to let everyone know that he's also, in the book in chapter 4, and in a very distilled way on what your thoughts are and what you do and your work. So someone's like, favorite chapter. Yes, I think it's probably a lot of people's favorite chapter. Do you have a favorite chapter?
Do I?
Mm-hmm.
I think the chapter on diet was really helpful because I've learned so much from you. And I've actually learned how much diet affects our ability to think and function and our energy. So I just love that whole area of nutrition and longevity, and he goes into really great detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know he does. I mean, the book, again, for those of you who have joined, I know there's maybe another 1,000 people that have joined since I started chatting. I mean, the book is well over 700 pages long, so it's a lot of information and probably something that you'll read several times just to kind of get everything in. Otherwise, the whole book will be highlighted. And I'll probably mention that again when Tony comes on. But similar to David's, you'll go through and every time you read it, you'll get even more information and knowledge out of it. But I love that chapter. I love different chapters in the book, kind of depending on what my focus was at the time. But the holistic biohacking me was a lot of the different chapters in the book.
Yeah, I was surprised, Serena, how much detail he went into the cutting edge of longevity.
Yeah.
Probably most people don't realize that then there's the mainstream. Well, mainstream is most people don't know much. Then there's our followers that know a fair bit about things you can do in your life. But then there's this I wouldn't say fringe, but there's a cutting edge group that's pushing the boundaries of learning in the human body and paying attention to clinical trial results. So Tony opens up about that in a way I've never seen a book before.
Yeah.
Certainly not a global bestseller like that. And I've been learning things from it. There's a whole table. I think it's chapter 3. It's one of the early ones about he goes through each of the peptides that doctors and people have used to improve brain function and muscle function. One of them I've worked on called MOTS-C. Well, I haven't worked on it, but I've helped others work on it. And that one improves mitochondrial function. We can talk about mitochondrial function. That's very important for energy and brain and muscle. But yeah, the point is that Tony was very brave, going really beyond what a lot of doctors know about. Even I do this for a living, I learned a lot from reading the book.
Yeah, so it's a great note for everyone that there's so much to learn. Even the experts are learning, and I think that it's because exactly what he said. He was sort of brave. He went out and he just this is sort of what Tony does. Anytime he takes on an interest, he goes and he compiles all the greatest experts in the world, and he distills all that information down into a digestible format, and all kind of in one place for people to read. So along with self-growth and personal development, he's very much done that here as well. So very cool. Before he comes in, we had a bunch of questions or a bunch of comments about a plant-based diet, even though it's discussed and sort of advocated in the book in some way. That someone made a comment that Tony is not vegan and that you have now taken on a largely plant-based, mostly vegan diet. Some people just sort of wanted to know what your thoughts were on that, and differences that you felt, I guess, over the past 8 months.
Yeah. Yes, since you educated me about the science of veganism, and I switched, and you basically rejuvenated or replaced my fridge. I think our fridges are very similar now. There's a lot of really tasty food, the kind of food that I wouldn't eat typically because I thought it was indulgent, but now I can eat it because it's part of a vegan diet. Things like hummus and eggplant dips with crackers and baby carrots, cucumbers. These are things that I love. So I don't feel like I'm lacking anything. I actually enjoy food more than I used to. And I don't find it hard at all. I switched pretty much within a week, over a week, and now it's just second nature. So how do I feel? Well, my body feels great. I get by with less sleep. I have more energy. I have a much better memory, though that might be partly because of adopting meditation that you have turned me on to as well. But I can get by with less sleep. I don't know if it's healthy to do that, but I can get by. And my blood biomarkers have actually gone even younger. And so I'm not going to share those, but they're much better than they were 8 months ago, and they were already pretty good at that point. So yeah, I'm full into veganism. I can't imagine changing it. I think this is going to be for the rest of my life.
Well, and I think that's amazing, and I'm so happy that you shared it. And I think it's also kind of good to note for the people out there, whether they're plant-based already or they're not, or they're considering transitioning or even doing it temporarily. I just got a note that says Tony's coming in a few minutes. Like 17 is going on right now, but it's also important to just be really mindful of what your nutritional intake is, what your nutrient levels are. And sometimes you do need to supplement, and especially if you do have a plant-based lifestyle or plant-based diet, that's important to keep note. Something that, David and I have discussed with him and obviously myself, to be very mindful of that and knowing when to take in those extra nutrients and supplement it, and mindful of your markers, and making sure that when you do have that either one meal or two, depending on how you fast, when you fast, that you make sure that it's really nutrient dense. You're getting in all the vitamins and minerals and plant-based protein as well.
Yeah, so I have a confession.
Yes.
My confession to you is what convinced me to become vegan was I could see the effects on your hair and your skin. Everyone can see it right now. It's amazing. So I wanted that. And someone commented on my hair today, so it has improved.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Tony. Welcome.
Hey, how
Hi,
are
Tony.
you doing? Nice to see you both.
So good to see you. Thank you for creating space and making the time. We're so excited
Well, thanks for having
to be
me on.
chatting.
Both so much. You're both so brilliant, and I can't believe you're interviewing me. I should be interviewing you. That's a good portion of my book. So, but happy to be on. Thanks for offering me the chance.
It's so mutual. You know, we all have such a love for each other. We've been going on and on about you and the book and just everything that's sort of in it. It really captures all of our lifestyles and philosophy and you know, Dave and I both have questions, you know, sort of about the book, but I'd like to just acknowledge you for with everything that you do, taking the time and the space to do all this research as you always do from all the greatest experts in the world and distilling all that information down into a digestible space in one little space. Well, it's not that little. I mean, it's 720 pages, but certainly smaller than a library. And putting that out there in the world, and then also taking all these proceeds and feeding 20 million people with it. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
And funding research.
That's true.
And funding research.
I can vouch for that. Thanks, Tony.
Well, I want, you know, this was a passion project for me, and it was in the middle of COVID, ironically, and was driven really by the aspect of, you know, I've always been, as you both know, I'm obsessed with anything to increase the quality of people's lives, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in any area of their life, their business. And so I've always been kind of a biohacker of sorts. I had to be, because, you know, I get on stage and I burn 11,300 calories in an average day. I have this group for 3 years. I jump 1,000 times, which, you know, I weigh 282 pounds. Every time you come down, it's 4 times your body weight. So imagine 1,000 jumps times 1,000 pounds. It's 1,000,000 pounds of pressure for one day. And so I've learned all these tools. But, you know, I've always been looking at the cutting edge. What really made me do this, though, this book specifically, and it got bigger and bigger because I wanted to cover everything, was I had an experience chasing a 22-year-old professional snowboarder down a mountain. And I'm not a professional. I tried to duplicate the tricks he was doing. And oh my God, I thought I died. When I woke up, I thought I broke my neck. I tore my rotator cuff early. And I've been through pain in my life. It was like a 9-9 pain. And so what do? You go to all your doctors, and 4 different doctors all told me surgery, surgery, surgery. One doctor looked at me straight in the face and said, you know, life as you know it is over. He said, you don't just have the shoulder, you have spinal stenosis, which, you know, I've been in pain for 14 years. And I kept saying to them, there's got to be a solution, because they said, you know, the surgery isn't guaranteed to work. You might be in a position where you can only lift your arm this far up. It might tear again. It'll take 4 to 6 months to heal. So I kept saying, you know, I work with a lot of the greatest athletes of all time in their sport. Like Cristiano Ronaldo, who's, you know, one of the greatest soccer players, if not the greatest in history. He was supposed to be out 3 months. He used stem cells. He was back in 3 weeks. So I kept asking about stem cells. And all these docs are good people, but they're just not informed. And so they'd say, oh, that might work for an elbow or, you know, an ankle or something, but it's never going to work for what you've got. And then Peter Diamandis is my dear friend and partner, and he's genius in this area. He knows everybody. I said, who's the best in the world on stem cells? And so he told me about Dr. Bob Hariri. I met once. I go, he's a neurosurgeon. He goes, no. He created those original studies where they took old rats and gave them young rats blood, and they got younger, the muscles got stronger, et cetera. That's pretty much how stem cells got, you know, really on the map after about 38 years ago. And so he told me, you got to get young stem cells. Once you turn 40 plus, they drop off the cliff. So he showed me where to go outside the country. I went and did 3 days of this. First day I was tired. Second day I had a cytokine response, you know, shaking, cold. I knew what it was, so I wasn't scared. But I woke up on the 3rd morning with no pain in my shoulder and no pain in my spine for the first time in 14 years. So, you know, you guys know I became an evangelist. And then I discovered, especially after meeting David and so many other people like yourself, it's not just stem cells. There's this rejuvenation revolution that's happening. And then I got invited by the Pope to come speak. He actually puts on, you know, every 2 years rather, the #1 regenerative conference with stem cells and everything, because he knows, you know, he sees this as a gift from God. And so he brings them all together. I met people there who were sent home to die. And, you know, now 8 years later, 10 years later, healed. You know, they used CAR T cells, for example. I met a little boy that was supposed to pass away at 5. He's 11 and healthy, got his sister's stem cells and turned around. I met Jack Nicklaus, the greatest golfer of all time. He talked about he couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes. The pain was excruciating. Couldn't play any sport. They're going to fuse his spine. And instead, he did stem cells, and now he's 82 years old playing golf and tennis again. So I just wanted to bring that to people, and I want to interview 150 people. Like I did with finance, I interviewed 150 of the best, scientists, the best Nobel laureates, the best regenerative doctors. That's how I got to meet both of you. And I'm on fire, and I just wanted to give it all to as many people as possible, and then use the book also, because we fed now. I said I'd feed 1 billion people in 10 years about 7 years ago. We're up to 850 million meals in my partnership.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I'm really happy. So people's lives are changing, and we're helping other people that are in need all simultaneously.
Wow, that's just, you're amazing. You're just, I mean, that's terrible sum up. I mean, I didn't realize 850 million. And for everyone that's on here, if you don't already have this book behind Gizmo, by the way, Tony, this is Gizmo.
Hi, Gizmo. He looks like he's in trouble relaxing. He's not a stressed dog.
he's totally relaxed. This is the book that we're all talking about, Tony's book, that you can find everywhere, Amazon, at your local bookstores, everywhere. And you're not just contributing to your own health and your family's health, but you're also contributing to, what will be 1 billion people that are going to be fed. So, I've been chatting a lot. David, did you want to, start us off with, a couple questions? Or okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, there's a small part about me, but what I love reading about really was you were educating me on areas that I didn't know about. Before you got on, I was saying that this is my living and I should know all this stuff, but I was educated by the book. There are boundaries that you're pushing in medicine, and back it up by the world's best scientists who are revealing what they know, but it hasn't reached the public yet. And by selling, I don't know, you're going to sell many tens of millions of copies of this book, maybe more. It's one of the best, if not the best-selling book of all time. Yeah. You're going to change millions and millions of lives with that. And so I just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
Well, it's very kind, but I really think yours is the most important part of the book. And I'm not saying that because you're online. I think my respect for you. The breakthroughs you're creating. If we would have said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you could actually reverse aging, you'd be a laughing stock in science. And, now there's still a lot of people that question it, obviously. But what excites me is seeing like Dr. George Church, I know you know very well, and, Ray Kurzweil, and people that really understand where the science is. And when you talk about when do we hit, longevity escape velocity, and they're telling me 12 years based on the doublings. Now, most of Ray Kurzweil was the person on the human genome. It took 13 years and cost $2.7 billion. And people thought it was going to cost hundreds of billions and would take 100 years, because after 7 years, they'd only decoded 5% of the human genome. But he explained that the doubling process in 7 years, they finished on time, below budget. And so I trust when he can make an estimate of what's happening in technology. He's one of the greatest, inventors of our time, but he's even better at anticipating. I'm curious for you, what do you think? When do you think escape velocity? And by the way, longevity escape velocity, for those who don't know, is this idea where science gets to a point where every year you're alive, they can reduce your biochemical or biological age by 1 year. And that's when the game starts to get really interesting. I'm curious, what do you estimate about that?
Well, yeah, things have really changed in the last few years. You're right. I was reticent or worried to even mention the word age reversal 5 years ago. And now it's the hottest thing. Everyone's talking about it. And that's because we've discovered that the body has a backup copy of youth that we can access. Before we as a field in my lab contributed to making that discovery, it seemed like an impossibility to really go back in time. We just slow down aging by doing good lifestyle and supplements kind of things. You also mentioned in the book, and Serena and I have talked about a lot, but this idea that we can reset the body with a simple, right now it's a genetic treatment, gene therapy, but one day it's going to be a pill. It could be 5 years from now, it could be 10. But when that's possible and it becomes mainstream, then it's going to be a very different planet. And we're going to look back at today with some sympathy for people that didn't make it long enough to be able to take part in this revolution. So what can you do now for yourself and your parents and your grandparents? Well, read Tony's book and look at ways to stay alive, healthier for longer, because the revolution's coming, and it's all about staying alive until that technology arrives.
Yeah, I think, and there's so many things. I mean, in the book, you'll discover, if you could pick it up, that there are tools that sound like magic. They sound like something that happened 20 or 30 years in the future, and they're happening right now. The book is everything you can do now or within 36 months. So you can prepare yourself and be the first ones to take advantage of it once those things are proven. But for example, there's a new company out called Insight Tech. And if you have a family member that, is in a position where they have Parkinson's, the shakes, it's really debilitating. They can't hold a glass. They can't walk across the room when it's extreme. And I went down to see this technology for the first time. I watched this woman who literally couldn't hold a glass, couldn't walk across the room. They treated her, outpatient treatment. They call it incisionless brain surgery. They use extreme intense ultrasound. It takes about an hour to find the spot where the problem is. They treat it in 15 seconds. She comes out and walks across the room perfectly, and it doesn't register at first. And they hand her a glass, and she hesitates. They said, no, go ahead. She reaches the glass and drinks with no tremors. I don't know if you've ever seen someone get those audio implants where they hear for the first time.
Yeah.
Crying her eyes out. Now, that was 2 years ago. I just got a note a month ago. She drove or did a 50-mile bike ride.
Wow.
I wasn't supposed to do anything. And by the way, this is now in 100 hospitals around the world, and it's covered by insurance in the United States. So, I mean, this stuff is just people don't know about it. There's a company right now called BioSplice that is in its final stage. For your, I know you guys know, but stage 1 for your listeners or viewers is safety. Stage 2 is efficacy. Stage 3 is efficacy at scale. So it's in the final piece before approval. They think they'll get approved the end of this year, beginning of next year. But so far they've shown its effectiveness, and I've met people who've had it. If you have osteoarthritis, which is debilitating, let's say you get older, goes through, and as you said, takes that original copy. It uses something called the Wnt pathway, which is what determines what stem cells, how many get made, where they go, how many are brain stem cells, heart stem cells. And literally, it regrows all your tendons in 11 months on average. You are not only do you not have the pain in your body more, but you have the equivalent of, like 16-year-old stem cells. It's like people say, how did Dolly the sheep be an old sheep and get this young sheep? Because we all know what's available. That copy is now available. So that's coming right now. But some of the things are simple, like just tests. I mean, I was never a guy to go do tests. I don't want to get in the system. Who wants to do that? They're going to overreact. I got to tell you what, when I did the research on this book, it's very different today. So for example, cancer, if you see this National Cancer Institute, they did a study with 100,000 people. And they found that if somebody got this stage 3 or stage 4 is when they were diagnosed, I mean, later in the process, 80% of them died. Now, I prefer the 20% that live and what did they do, but their point is fair. It's harder to turn it around at stage 3 and stage 4. If you're at stage 1 or 2 when it gets discovered, well, you've got an 88 to 99.9% chance. So I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman come to one of our Fountain Life centers, and his wife was pushing him, and she read all this, was excited about this, just happened. And she said to him, no, I want you to get a test. And he's grumbling and saying, oh, I've already had a physical. You had a traditional physical. And you've already had your analysis. I'm totally fine. Well, we did this new test. It's called GRAIL. GRAIL, the reason that most people discover these cancers late on is because we only have a few tests, mammograms, et cetera, that we do. We miss these other ones. Well, it tests 50 different cancers and can detect them when you barely have any symptoms whatsoever. So he does the GRAIL test. We found out he has bladder cancer. And literally, because it's stage 1, they go in, it's a 30-minute outpatient procedure, and he's totally fine. So you really want to know what's going on. And this GRAIL test, like all the scientists, most of the scientists in this book are driven to contribute because they've been through a tragedy. They lost a husband or a wife or a patient or someone, and they just wouldn't accept the standard of care. They went and pushed the last 20, 30 years, like you guys have, to get where we have these answers for them today. Another one, to give an example, is like one of the great things, I found these things are useful for me, but I also wrote this book is for people who you love. Because I get a call, I'm sure you guys do this as well. I'm at a stage of life where I know so many people, 2-3 times a month, someone calls and somebody in the family's got cancer, or they've had a stroke, or they got Alzheimer's, and what the heck do you do? And so that was another motivation for writing this. But one of my partners at Fountain Life is a brilliant doctor, Dr. Bill Kapp, and he's an orthopedist surgeon originally, but he built 12 hospitals, and he has a master's degree in genetics. He's just a genius of a guy. But he's one of those understated guys. Like,
Yeah, love
he
Bill.
talks about 1/10 my speed, half my volume, right? And he calls me up one day and he goes, Tony, I don't want to overstate, but he said, I really think we've come across one of the greatest breakthroughs in heart disease that we've seen in the last 10 years. And I said, what is it? And he said, well, you've had a CT scan before. And I said, yeah. He goes, well, even the best can misinterpret it, because it's looking to see the lesions that are in there. It's looking to see the calcium deposits, and it doesn't know the difference between something that's soft plaque that can break off and be a widowmaker and give you a heart attack or a stroke, and what is calcified, which actually means it's healed. And he said they do this now with this brand new CCTA scan. It just came out 6 months ago. And it literally uses an AI to digitally open all of your arteries, go through and find what, not only give you a score, but what's calcified, what's not, and then gives you a test. They can actually determine a heart attack up to 5 years in advance and show you what to do to prevent it. So I said, I'm in. I'll come do this. And my father-in-law was staying here at the house that day. He was here to visit for our little baby girl that she'd just been born. And I said, look, Pops, I said, he's 80 years old. And I've seen him. He was a like self-made man and was in the lumber business and always worked hard and strong. But the last couple of years, everybody around you, when you start getting close to 80, starts saying, well, you got to plan for, the end and all that stuff. And I can see the energy drop. So I said to him, I said, Pops, I said, I'm going to go do this thing. And we're both at a stage of life where we're going to have some soft plaques. But let's find out where it is, and then they'll show us what to do. He said, okay. So we do the test. My father-in-law is perfect. He's got like a 25-year-old's heart. I mean, he was better than I was. I was doing really great, but he was absolutely perfect. Yeah. So now his whole mindset changes. Now he's like, and then I said, well, Pops, what else has made you feel old? And he said, well, my hip here, he doesn't walk real well. I have a problem in his hip. And, we have this technique, it's called release, that was developed by these doctors, where they scan your body with ultrasound and they see where connective tissue is either causing circulation not to go or trapping a nerve. I've had it done on an ankle that I had problems with for 14 years. Took 10 minutes and my ankle's perfect. I mean, literally perfect. You couldn't touch it before. Like even a massage, it'd be like an electrical shock through my body from the nerves. And so I said, well, you guys take a look at him. They worked on him for 30 minutes, put the fluid in, opened up his hip, and he walked perfectly. So we get on the plane. This is my favorite experience. He's sitting across from me like this, and he goes, Tone, these people talking about living to 120, because, I've introduced him to a lot of brilliant people. He goes, I don't know if I buy that. I could live 20 more years. My heart's perfect. I'm walking perfect. He goes, you've only been married to my daughter 22 years. That's like another lifetime, So what I love seeing is how people get a compelling future when they read this book, and they see that they can really make changes that they thought were impossible. They were just, I had a man call me last night. A little video actually was sent to me, a text, and it was sent to me by this doctor that I know who does some of this release type work. And the man was on and on. He's 57 years old. He said, I've been really fit my whole life. He said, but I've had 6 spinal fusions. 6. He said, my life is total hell, total pain. He said, I just read this book. He said, I've gone and done my scans. I've done this. He says, I'm out of pain because I did the release process. And so it's so exciting to see people. I think we can all deal with a difficult today if we have a compelling tomorrow. And tomorrow can be brought closer, like immediately by taking some actions. It's pretty damn exciting. So I'm overjoyed that we can share with people these tools that, like, as David said, they're there, but it takes, I read a study that was done by the Washington Medical Association that said it takes 17 years from the time a breakthrough happens till it actually shows up in clinical practice. But there are doctors that are on the cutting edge that know this stuff right now. And if you know who they are, you can start to make changes most people would think are impossible.
Yeah, and thank you for all those stories and shares. Right? Every time you tell a story, it clicks more so, right? It helps people really anchor in the lesson or the story, the teaching behind it. What I wanted to just add on to what you're saying, what's also in your book, is that you also include practices that people can do. You address breath work, you address diet, you address the mind, things that don't cost anything that people can do right now as soon as they're off of this interview, and they can implement into their life. And I think that that's such an important reminder, because there are questions that people are saying, well, not everyone can afford those things.
That's right.
It's not accessible to everyone. Well, there are fundamentals that are accessible, and there's science behind those practices, which Tony addresses. And of course, Steve and I have addressed a few of them in our chats, but Tony addresses in his book as well. So
I'll tell you one that I'm the least likely promoter of: sleep. Because I'll sleep when I'm so excited about life, and I get so turned on. And my wife, she wants 8 hours sleep or 8.5, right? She's like, honey, come to bed. I'll sleep when I die. I'm right beside you here. But I was working on the sleep research at 6:25 in the morning, and I looked at my watch, and I had a meeting at 9:30 a.m. and I went, there's something wrong with this picture, right? But then I met Dr. Walker, who's the best sleep expert in the world, and he really changed my mindset. He says, Tony, I think I can convince you of the importance of it. He goes, I'll give you that, not everybody needs exactly 8 hours, and you clearly function with less. But he said there's a cumulative effect. And he said, we did a study with 1.7 billion people. And I laughed and I said, you're full of it. I said, nobody can coordinate a study of 1.7 billion people. He goes, we didn't have to. He said, there are 70 countries that have daylight savings time. And he said, all you got to do is look at the data. we recently sprung forward, right? Which means we lost 1 hour of sleep. In 70 countries around the world, on average, heart attacks jump over the next 3 days after we lose 1 hour sleep during that time. 23%. 23%. And when we back and get just 1 more hour of sleep in the fall, it drops. Heart attacks drop 21%. I give you 10 other statistics. That's the one that grabbed me. The other one with car accidents. It's mind-boggling what's there. And if you're a man, your longevity is affected and your biochemistry affected, because he showed statistically men that sleep only 4 to 5 hours, which has been my average before this. Now I'm moving to 6. Their testosterone is usually less than a man 10 years older than they are. And for women, beauties like yourself, intimacy is something that's so beautiful, but women's biochemistry needs sleep even more. And it affects their feeling of attractiveness. It affects their sensuality. It affects everything about their energy. And so that's why women need even more as a whole. So sleep is not something I normally would have focused on, but I found it. And, I wear a Whoop now. So I actually measure it because, if you don't measure, it doesn't get better. And what I like about the Whoop, there's so many Aura rings, lots of things, but I like it because it allows me in 2 seconds to look down. I can see all the detailed data, but I can see how much I strained, like put out, versus how much I recovered. And, I tend to strain more than I recover. And so when I see that time, I make those corrections. And I find that to be really invaluable. But yes, there are so many things here that cost you nothing. But I do want to tell you something else. Stem cells used to be very expensive. And the price is dropping just like everything else through the floor. When I went to go do what if I done the surgery on my shoulder, it would have cost more than the stem cells. And so the bottom line is, for some people, especially for something relative like an elbow or a knee and so forth, they're pretty much the price, getting close to the price of a laptop. And so, what's more important, your ability to function or your laptop? Well, hopefully people can do both. But like the Insight tech, more and more is coming with insurance. And at our firm, we have a series of centers around the country. We treat the entire Pittsburgh Steelers football team. So we do both performance, we do regeneration, and we do fundamental health for people and fitness. But in our centers, we're now forming a new insurance company. We have our first, I think it's 20,000 clients from 2 large companies. So we prove it works. We're providing all the testing that you could possibly imagine up front. We pay for it because so far, statistically, it prevents people from having a bigger problem later on. And so the firm can still make money and people don't have to worry. So this is being offered to corporations as we speak. So a lot of this is coming quick. I'm old enough to remember having a cell phone by Motorola, the first portable cell phone, and it weighed, I think it was like 8 pounds, and it cost like $4,000, it'd be like $10,000 today, and it cost $1 a minute, and it charged and gave you about 20 minutes of talk time. But it was cool. It was like a little piece of weight you could carry around. Well, look what we have now. What's in your pocket right now is more powerful than what took us to the moon and back. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper. So I want people to know, if you can just take care of yourself, things are becoming more available. And you'd be surprised. Some of these things don't cost a lot, but they have a giant impact. And we're better in your life than in your health, because without that, nothing else happens. As much as I'm a lover and I love how you love and contribution the most, you can't do that stuff when you feel like hell.
Yeah.
Right. And some of these practices don't just cost less and less money; they actually save you money.
Yeah.
Don't waste your money on expensive food. You can do it. Just eat fresh food. It's generally pretty cheap. The other thing I want everyone to know, and you talk about in the book, Tony, is that we now understand that aging happens at all stages of life, not just at the end. Yes. And what we do even early in life, even as children, impacts our health late in life. And we now have the ability to measure that. We call it the epigenetic clock or the DNA methylation clock. It's also known as the Horvath clock, whatever it's called, the biological clock. And it's through a swab or a blood test. I have one called Tally Health, tallyhealth.com. There are a bunch of them. And what that empowers people is that they can measure their age, and then they can act and see if it's working for them, if some of the practices that they adopt from your book are actually slowing or reversing aging. We now know that. We can know that. And the other things that are available in your book really used to be for high athletes, right? I advise some people that over the last 10 years were able to afford various treatments that you mentioned, including the stem cell treatment. But what excites me now, and the reason I'm getting out in public a lot more, is that it's accessible. Yes. It really is, and it can be as simple as looking at your blood work. You can now do that even absent your physician. You can test the heavy metals. I know in your book you talk a lot about that because your heart suffered, and I'm wondering how you felt when you discovered that you were filled with mercury That must have been quite a shock.
It's one of the tests I tell everybody about. I was 53 years old, and I'm on stage usually 12, 13 hours a day, literally holding a stadium of 15,000 people for multiple days in a row, 4 to 7 days, the average program. And I've done that my whole life, and I've gotten stronger as I've gotten older, and I've had these people who do testing for some of the top athletes in the world, do the measurements and see what I was doing. So it wasn't like, oh, I think I feel good. And then suddenly I find myself in a position where I couldn't remember things on stage. I know how many notes, and I'm going 12 hours a day. I mean, in the audience, I tell a story, I go, why was I telling that story, And it's like, I was good enough I could cover it. But it scared me that I couldn't possibly have, loss of my memories at this stage of life. I'm certainly not Alzheimer's. What the heck's going on? And then I was always exhausted, but I also, I was doing 115 cities, multi-day events in 14 to 16 countries. You'd be a little, I think, I'm going to be a little tired, but it was mercury. And I was a total vegan for 12 years. Then I felt I was a little bit emaciated. I wanted a little bit of protein. So I thought, I'll go, the cleanest protein is fish. So I'll just do fish. But my favorite fish were swordfish and tuna. And I didn't know they're 70-year-old fish, and they eat the younger fish, and we polluted our water so much they absorb their mercury. So one day, after being on stage, I just literally dropped. I lost a third of my blood supply. They rushed me to the hospital, and it burned a hole in my esophagus, and it was mercury. And when they tested me, they tested on a 0 to 5 scale. I was 123. It's the highest they'd ever measured. In fact, they sent the health department out here in Florida out to my house to interview my staff. They thought maybe my wife was trying to kill me because I have a large life insurance policy, but my wife, that's no way in a million years. And so they could measure where it came from. It was from the fish, and I don't methylate well. So the combination of those made it go through the roof. So I got to tell people, it's a test that's super inexpensive. It's part of a normal blood test. You got to know. And about 1 out of 3 people, I'd say, the people I personally know that have sent, find out they got an accumulation of aluminum, which can affect, obviously your memories. You'll see a lot of cadmium, and you see a lot of mercury. And so you got to get out of your system. If you can catch it when it's small, it's a lot easier. I went through the extreme in that situation. But I also want to mention, you said something else, which what I love is not only how you feel, I love to measure things. It's nice to feel great, and that's actually ideal. But it's like, I don't know, I'm more scientific in my mindset, like you are. And you're so, you mentioned you're 53 and you're 33, aren't you, biochemically? I mean, chronologically versus biochemically?
Yeah, it depends on the test.
Yes.
Yeah, and we both know Serena is a lot younger than she looks like.
Look at her. You don't even have to tell anybody about Serena. It's one look at her, right? But I've done your work now for about 9 months, and I'm 62 chronologically, 51 on the test that I did. So my goal is get another 10 years off there while we continue to move forward. But it's exciting to see that these things are now starting to become available to anybody. And just those tests, even, the prices are dropping through the floor. So, the great thing about technology is we all know every 18 months it doubles in power and halves in costs. Well, AI is now, as we all know, changing everything. And its impact on medicine is going to be, I think, some of the greatest impact of all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that, because I work at Harvard Medical School, and I love doctors. Some of them are some of my friends. But what was frustrating to me was that we would go to a doctor maybe once or twice a year. Typically, a man would do that. That's medieval. The idea that you would go rarely to a doctor and wait till you get sick to see one is craziness. Now we can measure things. We can put on heart monitors. We can take blood tests. We can take swabs of mouth. We can spit on things. And it's democratized. We can all have access to these tests. They're getting cheaper. And we can take our wellness partially into our own hands and work with our doctors and test ourselves daily if we want, and detect disease and prevent it before it actually happens. And, we used to wait till cancer happened. We used to wait till we had a heart attack. In the future, and really in the very near future, those things just won't happen. We'll know when they're about to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
there's so many things people can do that I want to. I'm sorry, Serena, I didn't mean to step on you there.
No. Go ahead. I was just commenting.
I was going to say there's so many things too that people they've been conditioned to believe, and I really feel for doctors. I mean, this book is filled with the stories of some of the greatest doctors alive, but their drive was to go beyond standard of care. And so much has become standard of care, and standard of care doesn't take into effect the uniqueness of each person. It doesn't take into effect the latest breakthroughs. It doesn't really take into effect precision medicine. My metaphor for doctors, I try to explain to some of my friends who've been frustrated with their doctors, because the Mayo Clinic did a study, for example, and showed that out of 287 patients in 2017, that the second opinion was the same as the first opinion only 12% of the time. It's another way of saying 88% of the time it was different. And now they recommend, they don't care who the doctor is, including yours, you got to get a second opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of people get frustrated by that. And I said, well, you got to understand, think of a doctor as somebody that has committed their life to help other people. Many of them cost their own health to try and take care of their patients because they have incredibly crazy schedules. So imagine somebody's walking by a river and they hear someone screaming and they jump in to save this person's life because they're drowning. Give them out and they'll save their life. But as soon as they do, there's 2 more screams. So they jump in, save one, save another, exhausted. Now there's 4 more screams. Well, they don't have time to do what you've done, David, which is go upstream and see who's throwing them in. That's really the difference, right?
I love that. Yeah.
That's where we are today. And it's hard because there's so much reinforcement for a doctor to keep doing things a certain way. And that's why you got to find doctors that both have a second opinion, but are educated in regenerative medicine, precision medicine. Because some of the stuff, doctors told me point blank, you're wasting your time, that's stupid, or this is a terrible experience. By the way, I described, for example, in stem cells, there have been 3 or 4 horrible experiences that have gone through the press in the United States because it was the Wild West. Now the FDA is now started to regulate it at a much better level now. But there have been some dumb things. So it's not like any intervention you do is going to have an impact. But I want to mention one other one, diabetes. My gosh. You hear people all the time that, the doctor tells them, well, you're just going to have to manage this for the rest of your life. And we all know you can go blind, you can lose limbs. I mean, it's diabetes is brutal. And it's exploded throughout the United States because of why? Because we're overweight. 75% of the US is either overweight or obese. And the fastest growing group is extremely obese, 100 pounds plus overweight in their BMI. So, but here's what's interesting. David, but most people don't. The Lancet published an article 3 years ago where they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that type 2 diabetes is completely reversible. You need to lose an average of 22 pounds because it's liver fat that's not allowing your body to process properly. And so they've done it again and again with people. And then people go, 22 pounds, oh, I'm never going to do that. Well, there's a new product out called Plenty that is nothing but we call it celery. And it expands in your stomach. It's none of the things that used to disturb people's tummies before. And you drink it with water beforehand. It expands your stomach. And the average weight loss, according to the FDA, is 22 pounds. That's the average. So, there's ways to do things that can just completely change your life, change the quality of your life. And you don't want to just do that for you. You want to do it because you probably have kids or family or friends that love you. And you want the energy to do the things you want to do in your life.
Yeah, well, and celery's full of apigenin too, which is also good for longevity. Absolutely. So that's another bonus.
Can I give a plug for something for you guys? Because I'm such a juiced about personally. I know you guys don't promote, but as an example, if you didn't say yes or no, so I'm just going to take advantage here to support you.
You can ask us. Yeah.
Most people, if they followed you or they've done their homework, they know that, your genome, your DNA is not your destiny, right? We all know it's the epigenome today, although still people think that, this is what my genome says, so that's what I'm going to be. It's not true. The epigenome for people as a metaphor is think of like a piano. The keys are the genome or your genes, the DNA. The piano player is the epigenome. That's what's going to determine the music of your life, what they turn on or turn off in the genes in your body. So you think about that, you go, okay, that's really interesting. The great breakthrough that David and some of the people that he's built his research on and take it to the next level is to understand that in order for your genome to function effectively, you have these 7 sirtuin genes, these master genes. And so these 7 genes do 4 things. Number 1, they make a difference in what genes get turned on or off, which will determine your aging, affect the quality of your health, your life. It's one of the critical aspects of life. The second thing these sirtuins do, these master genes, is they also reduce inflammation, which most of us know is the basis of breakdown. Thirdly, they affect the mitochondria's ability to actually create energy, ATP in the body, the conversion of food, which is the basis of your entire life. Without that, there's nothing. And then fourthly, they clean up your DNA because as we age, we get exposed to chemicals and radiation and so forth. As you get older and older, that DNA gets disrupted. So the metaphor I try to give in the book is, imagine you have this beautiful mansion and a young staff. And whatever breaks down, you never even know it. It gets fixed right away. That's your body probably till you're 40, maybe, sometimes longer, sometimes less. But what happens is, then there's a stage after 40, and the feeder, the juice that makes all this work is NAD plus, as you both know. And so that NAD drops by up to 50% by your late 40s, early 50s. So now it has to decide, am I going to use this material so that I can reduce inflammation? Am I going to turn on and off the right things? Am I going to clean up the DNA? So imagine that mansion, the staff's getting older and older, and they're getting senile, and now you don't have the materials anymore, and the place becomes a wreck. That's aging. But what most people don't know, and you guys clearly do, and some people know today, is that NAD also needs a precursor, which is NMN. And so if you look at mice and you look at an old mouse, a 70-year-old person would be like, if I think right, 20-year-old, 22-month-old mouse. What's interesting is they can run about a quarter of a kilometer if you put them on a track. But if you take a young mouse, the equivalent of a 21-year-old at their prime, they can run 4 times as much, a full kilometer. But guess what? You give NAD for 14 days to an old mouse, 70-year-old like mouse, and they run 3 to 4 kilometers, 3 to 4 times more than younger people. So I remember reading this and going, this is exciting, but not all mice studies transfer, obviously, right? So is it going to transfer? Well, I know you have your life experience. I know you have your father's life experience at 83 years old, outlifting you in the gym. I hope I'm not overstating that.
That's true. Yeah.
And walking, and like he's totally different than 10 years ago. Could you put him on, MN? But what's interesting is not all in MN is equal. So what's fascinating is we did tests, and I know you've done this too, David, on I think it was 6 brands we did, from $39 to $129 a month, just to see, does the more money give you more of the material? What's the quality? None of it had any MN in it. And I know you've done that too. And its reason is it comes from China. I said to these guys at the lab, I said, are these people just cheating everyone? And he said, no, they could be. It comes from China, but he said the timeline, in 30 to 45 days, it breaks down. So, we have a protocol that our consultant put together, gentleman, Dr. Lopez, who's very well known, uses AI and designs to create a more stable NMN. And he created some additional precursors around it. He just did a paper on it, a clinical paper I think you read just recently. So we have a product of our own we're excited about that I take. But now you, David, you and the group at Microbiotech and Ed Shulock, it's got exposed that you guys for the last couple of years have been working with the military. And in Boston, I guess what happened is it got out because it's supposed to be top secret,
Right.
the safety of this. But, this is something that increases endurance massively. And they said, okay, when you go with our special forces, and I guess the commander, if I understand this correctly, what happened was doing a briefing to his staff and didn't realize the person was in the press was in there. So it got out. And here's the update I can say, because the rest of it I know I can't say because it's not available. But what they found was for some of the greatest people in the world, athletes in the world, they saw massive increases in endurance just by creating this because that base of energy is available. They saw massive increase in cognitive capacity, which is most important because when you're behind enemy lines, this is what's going to save you and get you to finish the mission. So I can't say more than that other than MIB 626 is something you should look for. And how far do you think you guys are along? 18 to 24 months before it'll be approved? Because it's not a nutraceutical. It'll actually be a drug approved by the FDA.
Yeah, it's a drug that's different but related to NMN that works even better. And yeah, we got these positive results. MIB 626 will be the drug. Yeah, it's probably a couple of years away. It could be faster if COVID that trial works. There's 5 clinical trials. There's one in Alzheimer's disease, kidney failure, heart disease. There's a long list. There's a rare disease that affects mitochondria, the energy in young men and women. So yeah, I'm optimistic with those 5 shots on goal. That we're going to succeed and have something that people can take that's trustworthy, effective, and can rejuvenate them no matter what illness they have, as long as the sirtuins can rejuvenate the cells. And like you said, the sirtuins do a lot of things. We have 7 of them in our bodies. They take care of us when times are tough, and we can mimic those tough times. I call them adversity mimetics, and the kind of diets that Serena talks about, and you do in your book, Tony, and exercise, and some of the supplements, they mimic this adversity and turn on the sirtuins so we get those benefits and hopefully extend our healthy lifespan.
Yeah. Well, there's 400 biochemical effects that are affected by NAD in the body on a cellular level. I mean, it's magnificent. So imagine you could take something your doctor gave you that naturally would be in your body anyway, but it's been dropped down, and now you've got all these elements working at top speed. You're getting the maximum energy. You're cleaning up your DNA. You're turning on and off the right genes at the right time, and you're reducing inflammation. To me, of all the things that are out there, this is one of the single most exciting to me personally. So I talk about it when you're not in my presence, so I had to talk about your presence.
You're very generous, Tony, because I haven't really talked about it. It was a secret with the military, and Metrobiotech didn't want the publicity. Mr. Edgeshaw, like you mentioned, my business partner, is a very quiet, understated man.
Very much.
Thank you for telling the world about what we're doing. I think it's even better coming from you. And I was thinking next time, or perhaps every time I'm asked to give a talk about my research, I should just say, you should speak to Tony Robbins. He'll do a better job.
You're too kind.
Well, and just I just wanted to make a note again. Thank you guys for giving me a chance to do the little reminders throughout this. Is that everything that Tony is doing and that Dave is doing is just giving us reminders, the tools that we're empowered to manage our own health as well as others. And so when we talked about these tests and these tools and everything that's in the book, at the end of the day, it's really what you have control. You know, you have the power to heal yourself, to help heal others in these small and big ways. And it's that reminder that you can read the book, you can listen to the information, but you really do have to implement that process. Like you guys are the ones that do it.
My original teacher was a man named Jim Rohn. He used to have this phrase. He said, if you let your learning lead to knowledge, you become a fool. If you let your learning lead to action, you'll transform your life. And so for me, that's really the focus. And, you know, the end of the book, the last 2 chapters, if people pick it up, I hope they get there. It's a big book, but you know, I've been blown away by people who've read it 2 and 3 times, you know, it's only been out 2 months. But what's interesting is the last chapters are really about the power of the mind. Because you can do all the other things we talked about and screw it up with your mind. And most people, unfortunately, do, right? We all know the power of placebos. Most people don't realize that placebos were discovered only in World War II. You know, they were a doctor was treating these patients and they're going to shock, and he needed both for the pain and keep them out of shock. And they ran out of the material they needed. So, you know, what happened? The nurse, actually, no one knows her name, she really made this happen. She handed him a syringe with nothing but saline in it, just out of desperation, and said, here, doctor, I found some more morphine. And so he believed it, and he looked right in the eyes of these guys and said to them what he always said, you're going to be out of pain in minutes. Don't worry, you're going to be okay. He injected them. What's mind-boggling, 90% of them, the pain reduced massively, but none of them went into shock. So he was from Harvard. He came back after the war, and he's the person that put together what we now see as a standard way of testing, which is having a placebo against whatever intervention we do. And some placebos are stronger than interventions we develop, but you don't hear much about those because, you know, they don't make any money talking about them. But the bigger the intervention, the more your brain gets convinced. So a small pill compared to a big pill changes everything. You know, an injection is even more powerful. I described a surgery, the sham surgery, which is a placebo surgery. They did it, the Veterans Administration. They took 1/3 of the people who are going to have knee surgery for all these problems and just cut them open while they're under and then sewed them back up, did nothing to them. 2 years later, they were by far the ones that said they were the most healed, have the least pain. And so they stopped funding the traditional surgeries, literally. And then Harvard's done studies where they give people not an inert substance, not a sugar pill, but an actual drug. Like give you a barbiturate, but put it in this big blue pill and say, this is amphetamine. Your body's going to speed up. Be prepared for this. And literally, their body overcame the barbiturate that should have taken them down and accelerated their entire biochemistry up. That's how powerful our minds are. So I talk about that because, to me, it's the single most important element. And the most important element is your happiness. Happy people live longer. Happy people have better relationships. We kind of poo-poo happiness because we're cool by finding what's wrong. But the reality is all the studies show that happy people have a different life. So I hope people read those last 2 chapters because it'll remind you of something totally in your control. And I show you simple tools to control your mind. That's my personal expertise. Everything else in the book is not my opinion. Everything is based on the top scientists in the world. But the last 2 chapters are clearly my experience and my opinion. And I hope you get to it, and I hope it'll touch people's lives.
Yeah, you have some really good sayings in the book. I've got some. I wrote some down. Old age isn't a battle; it's a massacre. You're the CEO of your own health. We must always change, renew, rejuvenate ourselves. Otherwise, we harden. And one of the things that I think really hits home when I read your book, and I want everyone to know it, is that just by changing your life in 5 simple ways that you outline, you can extend your lifespan on average by 14 years. And that's just by doing the simple stuff. So we're talking about potentially 20, 30 years if you do the more advanced things. And as technology gets better, we get to take advantage of that too. Yeah.
I also, you know what I want people to know? I'm not about living forever. That's not my thing personally. I think having an end to life is something that makes life valuable. I mean, there's an old story that Ray Dalio told me. It was from an old, I think it was Twilight Zone. And not Ray Dalio, excuse me, Ray Kurzweil. And we were talking about lifespan and what if people can live 200 years, 300 years? There's whales that live 200 years on this planet, right? And he said, Tony, I think it gives a value. He goes, I remember this story. And he told me the story. And this is his version of it anyway. He said, in this Twilight Zone, this man is a gambler. So where do gamblers go when they die? Their idea of heaven is Vegas. So he shows up, he dies, he goes to heaven, he's in Vegas. He's at the top of the Wind Towers. He's got the presidential suite. He opens up his drawers. It's filled with money and cash and jewelry and watches. He opens all brand new suits and outfits, puts it all down, goes downstairs, goes to the blackjack taper, 21, 21, 21. Every single time, people are gathering around him. Then he plays, goes and plays craps, and he wins, and he wins, and he wins. And at the end of that night, all his dreams come true. He's not alone, just to put it that way, at the end of the night. He's having a good time. He wakes up the next day and does the same thing again. And the next day, the same thing again. Next day, and after about 3 weeks, one day they go, "You win." And he yells, "I always win. I want to talk to the main angel. There's something wrong here." He goes, I'm and the main angel comes, and he's dressed in his tuxedo, and he says, "Sir, can I help you?" And he said, "I don't belong here. I mean, I'm sick of this." He goes, "Every time I win, win, win." He goes, "I don't belong in heaven. I wasn't that good a person."
Wow.
The angel looks at him and said, "Who said you're in heaven?" But I think we need challenges, but what I am about is health span, right? Not lifespan, as health span. It's like however old we're going to live, let's live it to the very end. Let's live it with health and vitality and strength. And there's all kinds of research, I know, that shows that when people live into their 90s, they have less illness for less time, they die more quickly, and it's a different experience. And it's I think that's the biggest promise. I don't know. I'm sure there'll be a point, probably beyond my lifetime, where perhaps we can live forever. But I don't know that everyone will value life at the same level. I think it's an interesting question. My co-author, my dear friend, Peter Diamandis, he's an MD from Harvard, but he's also, he's a rocket scientist. He's brilliant. And I remember we were speaking at the Vatican, and there was a session. He raised his hand, asked the question of the group, and he said, "How many of you want to live to be 120 plus?" And like 10% of the room raised their hand in this Center for Longevity, right?
Yeah.
And I said, he was totally afterwards. He was like, "I can't believe it." He was upset. I said, "That's because most people associate 120 or even 100 to breaking down the face, the body, the memory. No one wants to live like that. But if you asked how many if you could live to be 120 like you were when you're 40, you get a very different reaction, right? And I think that's the promise of the direction that things are going. And that's what I'm excited science is bringing. And that's why I'm excited about the two of you, because you're out there educating, you're giving people answers right now that work, but you're also creating the future, both of you.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you for that. We're at the top of the hour, so I just want to make sure I know we want to respect your time, and you've given us so much of it. Before we jump off, I'm hoping that the three of us can make a pact about sleep.
Okay, tell me what you're asking for.
Yeah,
I think we need to be accountability partners.
Okay.
Tell you
What's
what.
the number? I'm willing to target 6 hours. That's what I'm trying to commit to. I don't think everybody needs them. I'd be recommending 8 for you if that's what makes you feel comfortable. But what do you think, David? What's it for you?
Well, I found with meditation and relaxation, and perhaps with the supplementation, I can feel good after 5 or 6 hours sleep. But I think I need more like 7, sometimes 8. So I'm going to aim to have at least an hour's extra sleep every day on average. And Serena, you better agree to this, because I know you're a real culprit.
We're like, it's like I had a conversation one time on The View, and I had these ladies that were there, and Barbara Walters was still there in those days, and I love her dearly, brilliant woman. And I did this piece in January about how to transform your body, and they all followed me into the green room. And afterwards, they said, "We're going to do this together." And I went, "Can I speak freely? Can I give you some coaching?" And I said, "How much I respect you, right? I said, Barbara, you're the best in the world, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "You're not the best in this area." And I said, "So here's the problem. If you go with people who are not best in this area, it's going to last 2 or 3 days. And one morning, you're not going to feel like working out. And you're going to go, one of you is going to go, 'Let's have a Starbucks, mocha, whatever that shit is.' And you're like, 'Okay.' And you lose momentum." I said, "You just need somebody that's already doing it as your partner. So when you go, 'Oh, I'm not doing this,' you go, 'Run!'" They combine to make it happen, right? So we may not be the best partners for this, but I'll commit to my hour more for me. I'm doing about 5 most of the time. I'm going for 6. I like the hour more. And then what is yours, Serena? What's going to be your number?
Okay, my number is going to be 5.5. So that's
Okay,
our
well,
5.5. I'm moving up to 6 because
God.
I'm being really honest. So that means everyone out there knows that's more than what I sleep on average already, even though I preach sleep. So 5.5 to move it up to 6.
Okay, Serena, you have to pledge to send us your Aura Ring data. And we'll
Hey, my sleep efficiency is like 97%. So Even if I'm sleeping less, I'm, 97% is pretty good. And I think it's meditation too. So, but I pledge that too, guys.
Meditation certainly helps. There's no, David's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And I get sometimes 20 minutes of meditation is like 2 hours of sleep, but it doesn't mean I should sleep less. That's 2 extra hours.
Yeah.
So.
And then I watch David's head going like this.
Well, this has been amazing. We have so many other questions. I don't know if Instagram is going to kick us off, or if you need to run. But
unfortunately, I have Dr. McCullough downstairs waiting for my next interview. I apologize, guys. So
okay, well, perfect. Well, tell Joey.
I'd love to do this again with you guys anytime you want. I love you guys dearly, and I'm so thrilled that you're spreading the word for everybody out there about what's possible. I really thank you both so much.
Thanks. And we're going to post this, Serena, so people can watch it again and share it.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. And we're going to do it everywhere. We created a TikTok and a YouTube, and this will be everywhere for just to educate people and give them all the tools. So
thanks to you both. Do blessings to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bless you guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Serena.
All right,
Bye.
talk to you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.